Hi guys, what's up? Jessica Cabesi here. So when you're first starting out in photography, it could be extremely intimidating because it can be a lot of information at once. So I thought I would make this video to give you guys my personal recommendations on camera bodies that you can start out with as a beginner, lenses that you can buy, and then photo editing programs that I personally like. You know, as a beginner photographer, color grading your photos and editing them is very important. So I definitely want to add that into the mix. There are so many cameras out there. There are so many lenses that you can get and programs, and I just wanted to give you guys my personal recommendations on my favorites. When I'm looking for videos on recommendations for things to buy and reviews and stuff like that, I really am interested in knowing that person's work and kind of their style of photography, because I feel like if their style fits more of my style, it's going to be more helpful to me. So I'm a photographer from Detroit. I've been doing photography for 8 years. I've done everything from senior pictures to baby pictures, family pictures, weddings. I do fashion photography as well. I've worked with modeling agencies in places like New York and Los Angeles. Been using Photoshop from around age 12 to 13. I've been graphic designing for a while, so I definitely have a photo editing background as well. It's nice to know the person's background so that they can cater to your style of photography that you're aiming to do. Because every photographer is different. Every photographer is going to recommend you different things. So to begin with, I encourage you guys to research other brands, other off brands in terms of lenses and camera stuff. These are just the ones that I've either personally used or I know friends who have used them that really like them and recommend them. So for the cameras that I'm going to be listing off, I would recommend that you guys buy the camera body on its own and not as a kit. So a kit basically is the camera body with the lens already. So they kind of give it to you already pre-chosen. But in my opinion, the kit lens isn't always the best lens. So how this works is the DSLRs come with interchangeable lenses. So as you can see, I'm pressing this button and I can take this lens off, and then what happens is you end up with the camera body on its own, and this would be the kit lens. The kit lenses are usually zoom lenses. They're good for versatile everyday things, but I don't think you can be very artistic with them, which is again why I would recommend buying the camera body on its own, which will be cheaper, and then buying a lens that you personally like that fits your style. And here's another lens that I bought separately that you can just mix and match. I guess the best way to explain it is kind of like a makeup palette, how they have their own brushes within the palette. So instead of buying the palette with the brushes, the default brushes in there, what you could do is buy the palette on its own for a little bit cheaper, and then you can go out and buy your own brushes separately. You can buy like maybe a better blending brush or whatever brush you want separate to that, because sometimes the brushes and the palettes aren't that great. They're just kind of standard brushes. So you're looking for something more specialized into the makeup that you want to do. So just think about it like that. When you first receive your body only camera, it will literally come like this. No lens. There will be something covering this, obviously, because this should be protected. But you can buy interchangeable lenses based on, again, your style of photography, different focal lengths. I think we spend too much money on a kit lens that maybe we don't even end up using the kit lens, and it's just, you don't even use it, and you can spend it on another lens that you really want. First camera I would recommend is the Canon Rebel T6. I've personally used this, and I think it's a great beginner camera. I think paired with the right lens, you really shouldn't have any issues with getting some nice pictures. The camera retails for about $350. You could probably buy it cheaper, used, or refurbished. The next camera I'd recommend is the T6i, which I think is pretty similar with a little bit of differences to the T6. It's, again, another good option, and it's about the same price. So definitely something to consider and to look into. So if you're interested to know the camera that I started photography with, it was the Canon 60D, and it's definitely a camera that I recommend because that's the camera I began with and I started my photography journey with. It was very easy for me to use, and I love the quality of the images. So it's definitely something I would recommend. Pricing is gonna vary. You can probably find it on eBay or you can buy it brand new. What it looks like online it retails for is about $260. Another camera that I haven't personally tried, but I've worked very closely with people who have used that for both weddings and portrait photography, is the Canon 7D, and I've heard nothing but good things about it. I've also seen the pictures that it takes. My friends have shown me the pictures. One of my second shooters uses it for the weddings that we shoot together, and the quality is amazing. By the way, if you're looking into a bundle and it comes with the kit lens and it's kind of the same price as the camera body, you might as well buy it with the kit lens. It's not gonna hurt to have an extra lens. So it's only if the price difference is going to be substantially lower to buy the camera body on its own. And that's going to vary from entry level to more professional. So now let's talk about the lenses, which I think really transform the picture. Honestly, lenses are very important. You can get a really nice picture with just the right lens. The lens that I absolutely always recommend that I started with as a photographer is the Canon 50mm 1.4 lens. I absolutely love this lens. A cheaper alternative to the 1.4, which I believe is about $300 to $400, would be the 1.8, and that would retail for $125. So this lens would be great for portraits, I don't know, senior pictures, family pictures. You can use it for a variety of things. It's very lightweight, it's versatile. It is a prime lens, keep in mind. So, and let me show you guys. There are zoom lenses, and then there are prime lenses. So prime lenses do not zoom, they are at a fixed focal length. So you would have to physically move forward and backwards if you wanted to zoom in and out. Definitely the 50 being at an f-stop of 1.4, 1.8 will be able to let in more light and give you a more creamy, light photo. I'm gonna try to not confuse everybody with the f-stop talk, but 1.8 versus this one, which is a 3.5. Prime lenses are able to let in more light, so just think of it as a circle. So maybe 1.8, let's just say, would be this wide, whereas 3.5 would be maybe that small. So it won't let in as much light. So definitely I prefer prime lenses, so I like to recommend them to people when they're first starting out in photography. But I think it is important to have a zoom lens, which will be my next recommendation. I have personally used this lens and I really liked it. It was the 70 to 300 millimeter, and it's at f4 to 5.6, and you can buy this used for about $159. I think this is a great zoom lens for wedding photography, if you're doing portraiture. I mean, it gives you a variety of options, and it's something good to have in your kit when you're first starting out. So another recommendation is the 85mm 1.8 lens, and this retails for about $300 online. This lens is going to be super close. When you first use this lens, especially on a crop sensor, you're going to notice that you have to back up a lot. So the person, let's say the person might be right here, you're gonna have to step all the way back here to be able to maybe even get a headshot. So it is a very closely zoomed in lens. It's 85 millimeters. I think this lens is amazing for things like headshots, close-up portraits. I think anyone who wants to get into portraits should invest in this lens. $300 is actually really good for the 85. The 85 1.2 is like thousands of dollars, so the 1.8 is definitely a good option. Another lens that is my absolute favorite that I use religiously is a 24 to 70 millimeter. It's f4, and used you can buy it at around $400 to $600. It's a little bit more on the pricier side, but if you're considering doing maybe street photography and maybe even wedding photography, I use this for a lot of my weddings. I think it's great. It has a good focal length for it, especially as a zoom lens. So definitely something to consider. Again, it's on the pricier side, but if you're able to invest in it, I definitely would recommend that lens. It's one of my favorites. So just a quick recap, the 50 would be good for portraits, headshots. You could do full body with them. 85 millimeter is great for headshots, close-up portraits. 70 to 300, you could use that for so many different photography purposes. I mean, you could do that for sports photography. You could also shoot a portrait with that as well. Being a zoom lens, you have a lot of options. And then there's the 24 to 70 lens, again, my favorite for getting, you can do a wide angle and then you can zoom in real close, get a portrait at the same time. So very versatile for a lot of situations. A lot of the lenses are pretty light. I mean, this is the 51.8 on the Rebel T6. And I mean, this is perfect to travel with. I think this would be a good setup if you're an influencer and you just want someone to take pictures of you. So definitely look into something like this. Okay, so now let's look into the applications for photo editing, which is also very important. And I'm going to be talking about applications on the computer, because I feel like if you're doing professional photography, you're going to end up editing on your computer in the long run. So it's important to have the right photo editing application for that. Now, there is an option for a free application. It's called GIMP, and I've never personally tried it. I know that some other photographers have used this. It is free, and I don't see the harm in trying it. If you're first starting out, it's definitely a really good option. Another option is a photo editing program called Affinity, and I've just read reviews on this. I have not personally tried this. It's $50, and that's actually pretty good for a photo editing software. So that's another option. The two programs that I currently use for my photo editing and that I've started with have been Lightroom and Photoshop. Now, Lightroom retails for about $140 alone, so you can buy it on its own. Photoshop retails for like $700 some alone. I believe that's what it said on the internet. So if it's wrong, it's the internet's fault. It's the internet. You can pay $10 a month and have them both together, which is what I currently do. I have Creative Cloud, so I use Lightroom and Photoshop together to edit my pictures. But realistically, if you're starting out in photography, I would probably recommend Lightroom. And the reason why I would recommend Lightroom is it's a lot easier to use. Not a lot of people are going to need the tools in Photoshop, but I'm going to say that I would recommend Photoshop in the long run because I feel like photographers should know how to use that for their photo editing. For instance, if you're going to be doing beauty photography, I mean, knowing how to skin retouch is very important, and you can't really do that properly in Lightroom. I mean, there are options for retouching in Lightroom, but I never retouch in Lightroom. I only retouch in Photoshop. But if you're a beginner photographer and you've never used these programs in your life and you're debating Photoshop, Lightroom, do Lightroom, because Photoshop is very intimidating and overwhelming. I don't want to try to scare you guys, but I've been using this since I was in diapers. It's not something that I would be comfortable recommending to a complete beginner. Lightroom is preset based, so you're basically using a bunch of presets and you're adjusting them for each photo, and I think that's a good foundation to start to learn things like white balance, temperature, camera calibration, shadows, highlights, all of that stuff. Lightroom is great for batch processing things. So if you're trying to do wedding photography, I think that would be perfect because you can apply presets and colors to more than one photo at once, which is great. Whereas Photoshop, it's not really its strong suit. Photoshop is better, in my opinion, for single photos. So if you're like concentrating on editing one picture at a time, maybe you have like a smaller number of photos, like 5 or 6. Photoshop would be way better for if you're editing a smaller number of pictures. Whereas again, if you're batch processing 50 pictures that you took on vacation, Lightroom would probably be the way to go for that. Lastly, let's talk about the accessories for your camera equipment. What extra stuff can you buy on top of the lenses and the cameras? So definitely a photography reflector is something I would recommend. You can buy this online for $10 to $20, maybe a little bit more. I would recommend the reflectors that have silver, gold, white, and black sides that are collapsible and interchangeable. You can just like zip it up and then switch them out to change the colors. That's something that I bought when I first started out, and I found that it really helped me. So that's something I would recommend to you guys. A memory card holder is very helpful to keep your memory cards in check, I guess. Just keep them stored in one spot. You don't want them to get dirty. Because that can cause corruption. You want to keep them organized, so that's definitely something to invest in, especially if you have more than one card. Another thing is a prism crystal. So basically an equilateral prism, and this can cost $15 to $20 online. I bought mine off of eBay. I think it creates some amazing effects. The equilateral prism is something that I was so excited to use when I bought it and found out about it. So I would definitely recommend that to you guys. It's really fun to use. You can come up with some cool effects when you're taking your photos just by putting it in front of your lens. A little bit of advice, don't go overboard, you guys. Don't go on a shopping spree and spend $5,000-$6,000 on all this photography equipment in one go. You're going to get very overwhelmed. You're gonna be intimidated because you have all this equipment you just spend thousands of dollars on that you don't really fully know how to use. Number 3, you're just gonna feel a lot of pressure because you just spent so much money, and you're gonna kind of just force yourself to use it because you want to get your money's worth. And you don't want to be in that situation. You don't want to make a commitment that big right off the bat. You want to start out small, spend a couple $100s on a couple things, see how you like it, and go from there. Start off small, don't overwhelm yourself, because we as humans, we get overwhelmed very easily. So I hope that these recommendations were helpful to you guys. If you have other recommendations that you would like to leave in the comments, feel free. I'm sure people would appreciate it. I would also encourage you guys to look up example photos from each lens so you guys can get an idea of what this lens will do when you put it on your camera body and you go out and take a picture. So that's kind of what I did when I first started. I would look up a lens like 24 to 70 millimeter example photos. So definitely would recommend you guys do that before spending money on a lens. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and please remember that this is not an overnight process. You're not going to be a good photographer just because you bought all the right equipment. It's going to take time and practice and a lot of experimenting to become a better photographer. So don't feel discouraged. So I hope that my recommendations were helpful for you guys, and I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and good luck to you guys out there. Bye.